Why was she the only one who didn't flinch? The folding chairs scraped violently against the concrete floor, the panic spreading like wildfire. A young Marine had snapped, his knife drawn, eyes lost in a battlefield halfway around the world. Everyone froze, except for her. Sarah Chun didn't shout. She moved one fluid motion, a pressure point, a controlled embrace, not aggression, anchoring. "You're safe," she whispered. "Jackson's alive. Smell the coffee upstairs. You're home." Her voice sliced through the chaos like a scalpel through scar tissue. In seconds, the knife clattered to the floor. The Marine broke into sobs. Sarah held him until the memory let go of him. But it wasn't just technique. It was something more, something unspoken. That's what made Marcus stand up. Red-faced, trembling, angry, he pointed to the Navy SEAL. Trident pin on her jacket. "Stolen valor," he said. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't even blink, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something dangerous. Something old. And when the MPs arrived 20 minutes later, Sarah didn't resist. She just whispered sorry to the therapist beside her and walked away in cuffs. Calm, steady, as if she'd been here before, because she had. But no one knew that yet. How could she sit so still, like the walls weren't closing in? Concrete walls, stainless steel bench, a holding cell designed to break the loud, the angry, the guilty. But she didn't break. Sarah Chun sat like a monk. The duty officer said she hadn't asked for water, food, or even the time. That bothered him. He'd seen guilty men scream and innocent ones cry, but never this. When Detective Rodriguez stepped into the room, she thought this would be routine. A woman caught pretending to be something she wasn't. The file was thin, too thin. 4 years of basic Navy service, administrative discharge, no commendations, no deployments, no nothing. It wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't Sarah. Studied Rodriguez like a mirror. What do my records say? Rodriguez flipped the pages again, growing colder. Standard enlistment, basic training, duty stations, blacked out, discharge. Admin, no SEAL records. Sarah leaned forward, quiet, but sharp. "Detective, what do you know about Operation Neptune's Trident?" Rodriguez's stomach turned. That name was buried in whispers. A failed assault, SEAL casualties, a black hole of classified silence. Her own brother had mentioned it once, then gone pale. Sarah's voice dropped, her accent barely noticeable. "I was there." Rodriguez didn't believe her. She wanted to, but that's not how this worked. Until Sarah rolled up her sleeve and showed the scars, not just the kind that break the skin, the kind that never leave. And then she said the words that changed everything. "Tell Admiral Mitchell that Phantom 7 is in custody." Why did the Admiral cancel every meeting and tell them to clear the roads? Because he knew the name, Phantom 7. He said it aloud once, then locked his jaw like he'd swallowed something sharp. The woman they just cuffed and booked for stolen valor wasn't just real. She was something more. A ghost. Back at the precinct, Detective Rodriguez sat frozen. The phone was still warm in her hand, but she wasn't hearing the whole music anymore. Just the sound of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. When Admiral Mitchell finally came on the line, she told him everything. Sarah Chun, custody, mentioned. Neptune's Trident, Phantom 7. There was a long pause. Then, "Do not file reports. Do not speak to anyone. I'm en route." He didn't say another word. The phone started ringing almost immediately. Agencies Rodriguez had never heard of. One. Caller CIA, maybe. Listed her badge number, home address, and her brother's unit in naval intelligence. Then hung up. Something massive had been set in motion, and none of it made sense except to Sarah. She waited in the cell with the calm of someone who had seen worse. Been worse, and come back changed. Rodriguez started to wonder. What kind of soldier is so dangerous? They erase her from the records? How do you apologize to a ghost? You don't. You just listen. Admiral Mitchell stormed into the San Diego precinct like a hurricane wrapped in ribbons. Everyone stepped back. Even the walls seemed to stand straighter. He didn't shake hands. He dropped a classified folder on the desk. You don't know what you've done, he said. Inside the folder was the truth, the kind no one ever reads, the kind they lock in basements and burn the keys. Sarah Chun wasn't pretending to be a SEAL. She was the reason 3 CIA assets were still breathing, the reason Los Angeles hadn't been irradiated, the reason his son came home from Kandahar. She wasn't a fraud. She was a legend, and she'd just been arrested by her own country. Rodriguez listened to it all. She saw the photos, the drone footage, the line at the bottom of the file. Phantom 7, 47 confirmed kills, 23 extractions, 3 terrorist plots dismantled. Status: deceased. Deceased. She was supposed to be dead. Sarah had been living under deep cover, a quiet life, built from ashes, teaching other veterans how to feel again, helping them breathe again, until a broken man with a bruised ego called the MPs. And now, her past was awake, and it was coming. What happens when your past becomes a target? You disappear. Again, inside the cell, Sarah barely moved, but her eyes were different now. Sharper, quieter. She wasn't Sarah, the trauma counselor, anymore. She was the ghost they used to call Phantom 7, and she knew exactly what this meant. Across the station, even the hardest detainees were drawn to her. Maria, a gang member with old wounds, whispered to her through the bars. Sarah listened, then spoke in a tone no one expected, soft, clinical, real. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a healer. The guard, Sergeant Torres, watched with quiet awe. He'd seen hundreds of veterans, but never one like her. You're different, he said. Sarah just nodded. She wasn't there to prove anything. She never was. And then the SUVs arrived. Government plates, security teams, radios crackling like thunder in a storm. The station went silent. The ghost was being summoned back into the shadows, where she belonged. Why did the Admiral look like he'd just lost a war? Because in a way, he had. He found her in the holding cell, calm, still, standing at attention. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Hello, Jim," she said. He flinched, because no one else alive called him that anymore. "You were supposed to be safe," he said, voice cracking. "We promised you a life," Sarah smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. There's no life for ghosts, Jim. Just missions. Just memories. He turned to the officers and told them what no one was supposed to know. She was part of a 4-person unit that didn't exist, women selected. For operations so dangerous, even SEALs wouldn't take them. They called it Ghost Unit. Her first mission killed 2 teammates. The second left her wounded. The third saved 17 hostages. They stopped counting after that. Now her cover was blown. Every enemy she'd ever made knew her name, her address, her face. Sarah didn't panic. She'd prepared for this moment since the day they told her she no longer existed. "I'll vanish," she said. Again. But this time, she wouldn't just be disappearing. She'd be hunted. Why did the man who ruined everything ask to see her? Because guilt burns longer than hate. Marcus stood at the glass doors, tears in his eyes, hands trembling. He wanted to apologize. He needed to. He didn't know. But knowing now didn't fix what he'd broken. Sarah walked toward him, calm, steady, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't destroy my life," she said. "You changed it." He tried to speak, but the words collapsed. "You acted from pain," she said. "I understand that. No judgment, no bitterness, just understanding. The kind forged in fire. I want you to keep going," she added. "Help the others, heal." And that was her legacy. Not the kills, not the missions, the healing. Even in the final moments, she left behind something bigger than fear. She left behind hope. What do you say to a legend who doesn't want to be one? Nothing. You just let her go. The cell door clicked open, and Sarah stepped into the world. No longer a name, no longer a record, a whisper. Before leaving, she gave her sealed trident to Sergeant Torres. Give this to someone who thinks heroism only happens in combat. Rodriguez stood quietly, her heart torn. What happens to you now? She asked. Sarah didn't answer. She disappeared into the convoy of black SUVs like a shadow melting at dawn. The officers, the veterans, the guards, they all watched. Not with awe, with reverence, because some stories aren't told in medals or reports. They're whispered in locker rooms, in trauma clinics, in nightmares and recovery rooms, and in every silent moment where one wounded soul helps another back into the light. Sarah Chun was gone, but Phantom 7? She had just returned, and somewhere in a new city, with a new name, in a world that would never remember her. She would start again, because sometimes, how could someone vanish so completely, and yet still leave behind a wake? 3 hours after the convoy disappeared, the San Diego precinct still felt haunted. The air hadn't settled. Radios buzzed with codes no one recognized. Unmarked SUVs lingered outside like sharks beneath still water. Detective Rodriguez sat at her desk, her notepad untouched. She had seen the scars, heard the voice, felt the weight of truth that didn't need to prove itself, but the image that they nicht gemeinden of Inandigt stayed with her. Wasn't the combat photo, or the Admiral's anger, or even Sarah's final words. It was the silence, the kind that comes after you've witnessed something holy and terrifying. Across town, Admiral Mitchell's phone never stopped ringing. DC wanted answers. CIA wanted containment. The Pentagon wanted a miracle. They wouldn't get one. Phantom 7's cover was blown, and once a ghost is seen, she can never unbecome it. The threat boards lit up within hours. Encrypted chatter, movement in Syria, a suspicious courier flight out of Karachi. Signals they didn't fully understand yet, but all pointing to one thing. Someone out there knew that Sarah Chun was alive, and they wanted her. Why didn't she run? She could have. She had before. But instead, Sarah sat at the edge of a cot inside a secure federal safe house 2 states away. Back straight, hands folded, her mind already 3 moves ahead. Mitchell had offered her a plane, a new identity, a new country if she wanted it. She didn't answer right away, because Sarah wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about Maria, James, Tommy, the broken veterans she'd been helping. Would they backslide now? Would they believe they were abandoned? I should have seen it coming, she finally said. You've been clean for 3 years, Mitchell replied. You saved people, lived quiet. That's not failure. No, she said, eyes distant. That's the problem. I started to believe I could stay. Mitchell sighed. We all believe that. But ghosts don't get endings. They get assignments, relocations, shadows. Sarah turned toward him. Do they know? She asked. He hesitated. Yes, Langley knows. Fort Bragg knows. Even NS, I got the ping. And the ones we used to chase? They know too. Sarah exhaled slowly, a breath that carried the weight of memory, the flash of muzzle fire in alleys, the screams in stairwells, the faces of those she saved and the ones she couldn't. Then, we don't have much time. What do you do when you're forced to become the thing you tried so hard to forget? You choose how. Mitchell had activated a contingency plan, one Sarah had hoped never to hear again. Project Halcyon, the fallback network, buried agents, safe zones, outdated contacts who owed their lives to the shadows. Sarah reviewed the intel. On a flickering laptop screen in the safe house, one cell active in Berlin, another rising in Venezuela. But the one that mattered most, the one that made her throat tighten, was in Los Angeles. They'd found the bomb after all, the one she'd disarmed in silence, alone in the belly of a crumbling sewer tunnel beneath a crowded downtown street. She remembered the wires, the sweat, the prayer, The fact that if her hand shook for even a second, she wouldn't be here. It wasn't just a memory. It was a message. They hadn't stopped trying, and now they knew who had stopped them. Mitchell paced behind her. "We need you to disappear again." Sarah stared at the screen. "No," she said. Quietly, "We need to finish what we started." Mitchell turned sharply. "That's not your job anymore." She stood, slowly, calm, steady. It was never just a job. Who protects the protector? That was the question Mitchell couldn't answer, because in this world, in the world Sarah belonged to, no one did. You disappeared. You sacrificed. You broke quietly, and when it was over, you didn't get a medal. You got another mission, but this wasn't another mission. This was personal. Rodriguez had been briefed. Threats traced. Surveillance initiated. And yet she couldn't sleep. The look in Sarah's eyes. It haunted her because it wasn't the look of someone angry. It was the look of someone accepting the cost. Rodriguez met with Mitchell one last time before Sarah left. "She's going back out there," Rodriguez said. "Isn't she?" "She's doing what needs to be done." "Why her?" "Because she's the one who can." Rodriguez shook her head. "No one should have to carry that alone." Mitchell looked at her, and for the first time, the weight of command showed through. "She's not alone." He tapped his chest. "She's carrying all of us." Why did the Admiral call her Hope and not Hero? Because heroes ask to be seen. Hope never does. It waits in the background, steadies the hands of the trembling, speaks softly in the storm. That's what Sarah had done in the basement of that community center. Not tactical moves, not muscle memory. Something deeper. She gave a man his life back. And when that got her arrested, she didn't explain. She just endured. Mitchell stood before his team, reading the last brief before exfil. The enemy was circling. The chatter suggested more than surveillance. Something was building, and Sarah? She was already gone. Not from this world, just from the one that made sense. She'd taken the first step back into the dark, and not one person in the briefing room believed she would return. But maybe that was the point. She never did any of this for them. She did it because someone had to. Why did the veterans keep asking if she was coming back? Because no one had ever spoken to them like she did. Not with sympathy, but with understanding. Dr. Wells kept the support group going. Same time, same place. But every time someone sat down, their eyes drifted to the empty chair in the back. Sarah's chair. Tommy stopped coming after the second session. Maria showed up late, but didn't speak. And Marcus, the one who started it all, sat in the exact same spot he did the day he made the call. But he didn't speak either. He just watched the door, like maybe, just maybe, she'd walk through it again. Dr. Wells didn't mention her name. Didn't have to. They all felt it. Her absence filled the room like smoke. And still, none of them knew who she really was. Not fully, not the way Rodriguez did now. What does it mean when the most dangerous woman in the world calls you friend? Detective Rodriguez kept waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for her notebook, scribbling questions that would never make it into a report. Why did she help Tommy? What would have happened if I'd pressed harder? Who's protecting her now? But the one question that never stopped haunting her was, what now? Mitchell had told her the truth. Sarah was back in the system. Her safe house was compromised. The mission parameters were changing daily. She wasn't just being protected, she was being reactivated. And Rodriguez couldn't tell anyone. She wasn't military. She wasn't cleared. She was a civilian caught in a ripple effect. But Sarah had looked her in the eye and said, "You asked the right questions." Rodriguez hadn't felt proud. She'd felt responsible. Because the moment she called Mitchell, Sarah's old life died, and the one ahead might not last long. Why didn't she tell anyone goodbye? Because ghosts don't get farewells. They get extractions, evacuations, quiet exits. Sarah left behind her apartment. Her journals, the sealed envelope she used to carry for veterans on suicide watch. The only thing she took with her was the scar down her arm. And a single coin. A challenge coin, not from the Navy, not from the CIA, from a child she'd saved on her third mission. A girl named Layla, who'd pressed the coin into her bloody hand and said, "You're the angel with fire eyes, Sarah." I'd never forgotten that now. As she boarded the unmarked plane at a private airstrip in Arizona, she gripped the coin in her fist. Mitchell was waiting on the tarmac. "You sure about this?" he asked. Sarah nodded once. "The team? Assembled? Intel?" "Still coming in." Sarah stared into the desert horizon, the wind tugging at her jacket. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Mitchell's voice was quiet. "Everything." "What happens when a ghost comes home?" "They don't call it that." Not out loud, but that's what it felt like when the aircraft touched down on foreign soil again. The team was already waiting. A combat medic, a cyber intel officer, a logistics phantom from the Defense Intelligence Agency. 3 faces she didn't recognize. That was good, clean. But one face she did, and it made her stop in the middle of the tarmac. Jenkins, her old spotter, the one who dragged her out of the Aleppo compound under sniper fire, the one she thought was dead. He didn't salute. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like no time had passed. "Thought you were retired," Sarah said. "I was. What changed?" "They told me Phantom 7 was back," and that was all he needed to say. They began planning the operation that night. Code name, Echo Fall. Target, an emerging terror network linked to the Long Beach plot, the same organization that had gone silent after she disarmed their bomb. Now, they were resurfacing, and their first move was personal. Sarah's name had appeared on an intercepted kill list, and it was near the top. Why did they choose to fight this one in silence? Because making noise never saved anyone. The intel confirmed what they feared. The network had split into cells, gone dark, embedded in civilian hubs, old tactics, Cold War playbook. They weren't looking for a strike force. They were looking for revenge. Sarah reviewed the dossiers. One target in particular made her heart drop. A therapist in San Diego, Dr. Patricia Wells. The group had been compromised. They knew where Sarah had been, who she'd spoken to, who she'd helped. The kill list wasn't just names, it was messages. "If we can't touch you, we'll touch what you love." Sarah didn't wait for permission. She stood. "I'm going back." Mitchell tried to stop her. Not with orders, but with reason. "You're a target. They already know. This is bigger than you." Sarah looked him dead in the eye, then send someone else. But he didn't, because they both knew. There was no one else like her. Why would someone risk everything for people who never even knew the truth? Because service doesn't stop when the war ends. Sarah came back to San Diego under moonlight. No fanfare, no orders, no name. A black SUV dropped her 2 blocks from the center. No security detail, no rifle. Just the city she once tried to call home. From a rooftop across the street, she watched the building. The support group lights were still on. Inside, Dr. Wells leaned in gently toward a trembling vet. It wasn't Tommy. He hadn't come back, but Maria was there, Marcus too. Sarah watched each face, memorizing their expressions, looking for signs. Nothing obvious yet. No watchers, no patterns, but she felt it. Something had shifted, like a trap. Waiting for a breath, she reached for the radio clipped under her jacket. Echo 1, visual on sight. No heat signatures out of place. A crackle in her earpiece. Jenkins, copy, secondary team in position. Watcher 6. Sarah crouched back, scanning alleys. Fire escapes, power lines, the quiet was too quiet. They weren't going to attack the building. They were going to wait for her. What do you do when your enemy doesn't want a victory? They want a spectacle. You deny them the stage. At 3:17 a.m., a black van rolled through a stop sign 1 block south. No headlights, no plates. Sarah didn't move. A man stepped out. Civilian clothes, oversized hoodie, too clean, too precise. He didn't look at the center. He looked at the sky, signaling. Sarah's breath slowed. She tapped the earpiece twice. Alert code. Jenkins, we've got movement. Confirming with drone. Hold tight. Sarah didn't hold tight. She was already climbing down the fire escape. Nod. To intercept. To intercept meant a fight. She didn't want to fight. She wanted information. She made it to street level in 20 seconds, circling wide through the shadows. The man with the hoodie was lighting a cigarette, but it wasn't a cigarette. It was a sensor beacon, a locator. They weren't waiting to strike here. They were marking it for a drone, for a car bomb, for something worse. Sarah moved. Why did she stop him without even drawing a weapon? Because ghosts don't fight unless they have to. She walked right up to him, silenced his breath, and tapped his shoulder. He turned, saw her face. His eyes widened for half a second, just long enough to confirm what she already knew. He recognized her. That meant they'd seen the photo, the one with the dirt and blood and fire, the one labeled Phantom 7. Before he could speak, her hand was on his throat, just enough to press, not enough to crush. Who sent you? She whispered. He reached for his waistband. She disarmed him without flinching. No more second chances. He smiled. A sick, cracked smile. You're already too late. She knocked him unconscious and dragged him into the alley. Jenkins and his secondary team swept in seconds later. No ID, no phone. Just a wrist tattoo with coordinates. Jenkins scanned it, cursed under his breath. Warehouse, East Harbor, tonight. Sarah didn't hesitate. We move. Why did she enter the warehouse? First, alone? Because she'd rather die than risk anyone else getting pulled into her shadow. It was an old shipping depot near the docks, half condemned, all forgotten. Inside, silence. Outside, a van ticking quietly beneath a stack of pallets. Jenkins and the others stayed back, setting up a perimeter. Sarah walked straight in. No body armor, no helmet. Just resolve. She followed the faint blue light down the hallway. And there, on a folding table, was a screen. Footage from the support group, live feed. A camera hidden in the basement light fixture, and next to it, a sat phone, already dialing. It connected. No voice on the other end. Just static. Then breathing. Sarah didn't speak. The voice came low, crackled, distorted. Still chasing ghosts, Phantom? She didn't blink. Still hiding behind proxies? Laugh. It doesn't matter. The world already knows who you are, and they'll know what happens. When legends fall, the line went dead. Sarah stared at the screen, at the faces of the veterans she tried to help. A new kind of fury rose in her chest. Not the kind that screams. The kind that makes promises. She turned to Jenkins. They're not going after me. What do you mean? They're going after the ones I made better. What happens when healing becomes a target? You stop healing. You start hunting. Sarah and Jenkins returned to the makeshift command room. Within 45 minutes, they tracked the IP routing from the sat phone to an encrypted server, somewhere in Eastern Europe. Too late to trace fully. Too fast to follow. But one name came up again and again in intercepted chatter. Black Horizon, an old enemy, a remnant faction. Leftovers from a war that was never officially fought. Sarah had dismantled part of them years ago during Operation Neptune's Trident. Now, they were rebuilding, and they wanted revenge. Jenkins stared at the map, jaw locked. This isn't just about you. No, Sarah said. It's about the idea of me. What do we do? She looked out at the rising dawn, the sun bleeding over rooftops like spilled copper. We ended. Why do some enemies stay hidden for years, only to reappear when you're finally unarmed? Because they don't want to beat you in war. They want to beat you in peace. Black Horizon wasn't a name people said out loud. Not in briefings. Not in bars. Not even in nightmares. But Sarah remembered them. Every mission, every face, every body. The splinter group that rose from the ashes of failed regimes, fractured cells, broken alliances. They didn't fight for ideology. They fought for power, and Sarah had taken something from them in Aleppo. She ended their commander's life with 2 suppressed rounds to the skull. Now, years later, his brother had resurfaced, rebuilt, rewired, and reactivated the old vendetta. Mitchell called it a flare-up. Sarah called it a reckoning. Either way, she was going back in. What does it mean to become operational again, after you've learned how to feel? It means everything hurts more. Pain isn't just a risk. It's personal now. Jenkins handed Sarah a new loadout kit. Lightweight armor, advanced optics, custom sidearm with her old specs. She didn't ask for a sniper rifle. She didn't need one. She was going in close. First strike has to be surgical, she said. No alarms, no mess. Jenkins nodded. And if it gets loud? Sarah looked up, her voice quiet. Then we finish it. The first target was a front operation. A private security firm in Sarajevo that trained mercenaries with no flag. At 3:04 a.m., Sarah breached the compound through the underground water line. No backup, no extraction plan, just a silent sidearm. And names, the last words the guard heard before Sarah choked him out. You chose the wrong war to restart. Why did she leave some alive? Because fear is a message too. Sarah took out 5 armed targets in under 7 minutes. Left 2 breathing, not out of mercy, out of strategy. They'd wake up handcuffed to a radiator, watching the security footage of Sarah moving through the facility. Like vapor, next to them, a photo of the support group in San Diego, and a note, come near them again, and I won't miss. The message wasn't for them. It was for the man at the top, the one who called himself Corvus. No real name, just a shadow title. But Sarah remembered his real name. She had whispered it to him once while dragging his brother's body out of a fire he never forgot. And now he wanted her to remember him too. What do you do when the predator turns the hunt into a puzzle? You don't play, you reset the board. Corvus wasn't just trying to kill her. He was trying to unravel her. Every facility she hit, he left something behind. A photo, a voice recording, a piece of her past in Istanbul. She found the journal she'd lost during her second deployment, pages torn, redacted, burned. In Warsaw, she found a shell casing engraved with the date of her first kill. He was watching, listening, predicting. You sure you're ready for this? Jenkins asked. I was never ready. She said, that's why I survived. But something was shifting in her. Not fear, not rage, something deeper, grief. Not for what had been done to her, but for what she had to become. Again, what is it? Feel like to become the weapon you buried? Like breaking your own promise and knowing no one will ever forgive you for it. Sarah made the call to Mitchell on a secure channel. 3 sights down. 4th one's bait. I'm going anyway. Mitchell's. Silence said it all. You don't have to, he said finally. Yes, I do. Why? Sarah's voice dropped. Because they're using me to hurt people who have no defense. I gave up my life for peace. I'm not letting them burn it down to make a point. When the 4th strike came, it wasn't stealth, it was fire. A factory. Compound in the Slovak mountains. Packed with weapons, surveillance gear, tactical gear marked for export to unknown buyers. Sarah didn't sneak in. She walked in the front alone. What happened inside that compound? That part. Only she knows. Jenkins arrived 6 minutes later with 2 backup teams. But by then, it was already over. 15 bodies. No gunfire reported, only an explosion in the back wing. Precise. Surgical, inside the main office, a phrase scrawled in blood. On the concrete wall, ghosts never sleep. No sign of Sarah, no trace of Corvus, but in the surveillance archive. One clip, 10 seconds, her eyes staring directly into the camera, black with determination. No rage, no fear. Just purpose, like. She knew this wouldn't end with a bullet or a medal. It would end when she was the only one left standing. Why was she back in D.C., but not allowed through the front door? Because the government that made her now feared her, Sarah had burned the edges of Black Horizon. 3 facilities, 7 top-level assets, 2 covert trafficking routes eliminated, and she'd done it without backup, without orders, without clearance. It was efficient. It was surgical. It was a problem. Admiral Mitchell met her in the parking lot outside the Defense Intelligence Building, not in uniform, but in the civilian coat, no ribbons, no rank. He didn't look like a commander. He looked like someone about to say something unforgivable. "Come with me," he said quietly. Sarah didn't move. "Why are we going through the front?" He hesitated. "Because you're not cleared for entry anymore. What happens when the system writes you out of its own story? You become the footnote no one dares erase." Inside a secure annex 3 blocks from the Pentagon, Sarah was escorted into a soundproof room. No windows, 1 chair, a metal table, a folder. The folder had her name on it, but not her real name. Just Phantom 7. 2 men entered, one in a gray suit with no insignia, the other in Air Force blues, high-ranking, unreadable. They didn't ask her how she was. They didn't thank her for dismantling a terrorist supply chain. They slid the folder. Across the table inside, a formal warning: unauthorized international operations, breach of protocol, violation of deep cover protocol. Sarah read it in silence. Then she looked up. "Did you read the casualty reports?" she asked. The man in gray adjusted his cufflink. "Your actions created political fallout. Satellite footage, civilian concern. We had to answer questions." "I saved lives," she said. "You went off mission." She closed the folder slowly. "No. I became the mission. What do you do when the only people who understand you are afraid of you?" "You stop explaining." Mitchell paced in the hallway outside the hearing room. He knew what was happening behind that door. Bureaucrats with silver tongues were trying to tame a storm they never understood. Sarah wasn't a rogue operative. She was what they created, a scalpel they'd left in the wound, then forgot to remove. When she walked out, she didn't speak, just handed Mitchell the folder. "What did they say?" he asked. She shrugged. "That I'm not to engage further, not to return to U.S. operations, that if I activate myself again, they'll consider it hostile action." Mitchell clenched his jaw. "And you?" "I told them they'll need better locks." Why did the ones she saved have more faith in her than the ones who trained her? Because they didn't see her as an asset. They saw her as a human being. Back in San Diego, something had shifted in the support group. Marcus had stopped showing up, not out of shame, but because he was organizing meetings for veterans who were afraid to speak in public. Maria was mentoring a young woman whose brother had just returned from deployment. Even Tommy had come back, quieter, still shaking, the present. They didn't know the details, but they knew something had changed after Sarah left. They could feel it in the way they sat together now, tighter, more aware, like they were connected by something invisible, like she was still with them. What does it mean to heal from something you'll never talk about? It means your life becomes your answer. Sarah didn't go underground this time. Not right away. She returned to the place no one expected, the quiet cabin upstate where she used to decompress between missions. Jenkins met her there, unannounced. He brought coffee, no words. They sat on the porch for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "You really done?" She looked at the trees, listening to the silence between them. "No." "Even after what they said?" She nodded. "I don't need their permission. I just need the target." Jenkins smiled without humor. "Still the same ghost." Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, I used to disappear because I had to. A pause. Now, I disappear because it's the only way to protect what matters." Why didn't she wait for permission? Because permission takes time, and people were already in danger. Sarah was in the woods, splitting kindling behind her cabin, when the encrypted call came through. No caller ID, just a voice. Male, American, scared. "They're here." She froze. "Who?" "You know who. The line cut. No signature. No trace. But the weight in his voice was enough. Corvus wasn't done. He was on U.S. soil. And this time, he wasn't interested in symbols or legacies. He was interested in targets. Sarah dropped the axe, grabbed the sat phone from her pack, and keyed the distress phrase Mitchell had told her to never use again. Shadow breach. Domestic. What happens when the only person who can stop the threat has already been told to stand down? You stop asking for clearance. The coordinates came through 15 minutes later. Encrypted burst. Emergency flag. A container yard outside Long Beach. The same city Sarah had saved once before, crawling through storm drains to disarm a dirty bomb. While federal agencies argued over jurisdiction, now they were back, but this time, there would be no arguing. There wouldn't be time. Sarah was already in motion. Jenkins met her halfway. No orders, no briefing. Just one question. What's the plan? Her answer was simple. End it. Why didn't she bring a full team? Because this wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. The container yard was quiet. Too quiet. No guards, no workers. Just a long line of crates, stretching like gravestones under. Amber light. Sarah moved between shadows like smoke. Then she saw it. The mark. A faded Black Horizon emblem sprayed on one container. Not a message. A trap. She stepped back just as the door blew outward, shrapnel ripping through air like teeth. She hit the ground, rolled, drew, and froze, because standing inside the open container was Marcus, handcuffed, beaten, gagged, and behind him, a man in black, Corvus. What do you do when your past shows up wearing someone else's blood? You make peace with what you're about to become. Sarah raised her weapon, but Corvus didn't. Flinch. You're still predictable, he said, still trying to save the broken ones. His accent was faint German? Russian? Washed in too many borders. He shoved Marcus forward. I thought it poetic, he said, smiling. He turned you in once. Now he gets to die for you. Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. If you wanted me dead, she said, you'd have taken the shot. Corvus chuckled. You still think this is about you? She stepped closer. You're here. I'm here. It's always been about me. The lights snapped out. The second wave was coming. Why didn't she run? Because she'd stopped running a long time ago. Gunfire lit the yard. Jenkins radioed in. Multiple hostiles. 4-man sweep from east. I've got your 6. But Sarah didn't move. She kept her eyes on Marcus, now slumped at the base of the container. Blood trailing from his mouth. She'd seen this scene before. In Fallujah, in Kabul, in nightmares. But never like this. Never with so much silence in her heart. She charged. What does vengeance sound like when it finally speaks? It doesn't shout. It whispers, one by one. Sarah dropped the hostiles. No wasted motion. Every step, an echo of training buried beneath 3 years of pretending to be something else. The final man stood between her and Corvus, a knife drawn. Hesitating, she didn't. When she finally reached Corvus, he was waiting. No gun, no weapon. Just a detonator in one hand. And Marcus's dog tags in the other. I could level this yard, he said. I know, she replied. But it wouldn't change anything, would it? He stared at her. You killed my brother. No, she said. I ended what he started. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Jenkins' voice crackled through her earpiece. Device disabled. Signal jammed. Corvus's face cracked. For the first time, fear, real fear. She moved him one step, fast, and hit him hard enough to shatter silence. What does justice look like when no court will ever see it? Sometimes, it looks like a ghost walking away. Sarah didn't kill Corvus. She left him cuffed to the same rail. Marcus had been tied to poetic in a way. When federal response teams finally arrived, too late. As usual, she was already gone. But they'd find the note she left in his pocket. One line. Not every war ends on paper. Why didn't she stay to watch the headlines? Because the truth doesn't need recognition, only results. The raid made national news by morning. Unconfirmed terrorist plot disrupted at Long Beach shipping terminal. No names, no photos. Just a half sentence about anonymous military cooperation and a joint task force. But everyone in the building that night knew who had stopped it, and none of them would speak a word. Corvus was taken into federal custody, bleeding, broken, but alive. And Marcus survived, bruised, shaken, humbled. They let him walk after a full medical evaluation. The only thing in his pocket? A Trident pen, cleaned, polished, and wrapped in a folded napkin. Where do ghosts go when there's nothing left to fight? They don't retire. They fade. Mitchell tried to find her, called in every favor, scanned every satellite, reached out through every back channel. But Sarah was gone. No trace, not a signature, not a footprint. Not even Jenkins knew where she went. One day he checked the cabin, and all that remained was an empty coffee mug on the windowsill and a fire pit still warm. And a note not signed, just one sentence. Some wounds never close, but they can be carried with purpose. Why did the support group still leave that chair open in the back? Because some absences never feel empty. They didn't talk about her, not directly, but her presence remained. In the way they sat closer now, in the way Maria checked on newcomers, in the way Marcus listened without interrupting, the group had changed. Not because of speeches, because of what she gave them in silence. A blueprint? Not for surviving war, but for surviving after. What does a legacy look like when it's never named? It looks like a veteran calming another veteran in a supermarket parking lot. It looks like a therapist in Des Moines using a grounding technique that doesn't exist in any manual, but works every time. It looks like a young girl in a city shelter, wearing a jacket with a small gold pin sewn inside the lining. No context, no backstory. Just presence, echoes, ripples, whispers 1 year later. Rodriguez received a package in the mail. No return address inside. A flash drive, encrypted. She cracked it out of instinct. The file inside was audio, a voice log, Sarah's voice. Calm, grounded, tired. If you're hearing this, I'm somewhere. I can't be found, not for safety, for peace. The mission's not over. It never is. But some things can't be fought with bullets. Trauma, loss, guilt, they linger. You don't beat them. You live alongside them. You learn their names. You speak them out loud, and then you help someone else do the same. Rodriguez sat in silence for a long time. Then she copied the file and uploaded it to a private database for trauma counselors across the country. She never said who it came from. She didn't have to. What does it mean to be a ghost? Not to haunt, but to guard. To walk through a world that's still broken, still bruised, and choose to protect it anyway. Sarah Chun never received medals. She never asked for them. She never got her name cleared, or her service recognized. But among the people who matter, the broken, the grieving, the healing, she became something more. A myth whispered between therapy sessions. A story passed around in hushed voices. A symbol. The warrior who never asked to be seen, but always stood in the fire. Because some legends don't live in the light. They are the light, and they don't fade. They watch, they protect. And when the world forgets them, they return. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts and then disappears into the quiet it fought so hard to protect.